Welcome to the Life's Best Medicine podcast, where we are finding hope and healing one episode at a time. No appointment needed, no rubber gloves, and no copay. Just a healthy dose of life lessons to help equip you for this wild journey we call life. Hey everyone, this is a friendly reminder that we are here for entertainment purposes only. We may not even be that entertaining at times, but this is not medical advice. Talk to your doctor, check with your healthcare professionals before making any lifestyle changes or medicine changes. What we're talking about is our clinical experience and what we've seen. And so if you really want our advice, you can consult us. You can actually consult me as a doctor, or you can consult my guest and get all your questions answered. But we can't give free medical advice because we can't pay our bills with that. But we can help to educate you a bit and allow you to think a little bit. And always reach out to your medical professional before making any lifestyle changes. Thank you. Hey, everyone. We made it to March. Enjoy this episode brought to you by Health Code. GETHLTH.com. They're doing great stuff. They have a great berberine product that I love that I'm using with my patients. And it has turmeric and anti-inflammatories and all that for us to recover from our hard workouts. Hopefully we're still doing those in March. And also they have their great shakes. Of course, the chocolate macadamia is my favorite. Also, they have their creamy vanilla. They have a vegan option with fermented pea protein, which is their claim to fame right now. They've really reached a lot of people with that. It's expensive to make that, but they're taking a bite to make sure they get that product out to people. So anyways, thank you for listening. Patreon supporters especially, thank you. Greatly appreciate your support. It's less than 1% of the listeners, so we hope that a few more jump on board there so we pay our guys and not have to take another sponsor, hopefully. But again, thank you and happy 2025 to you. Keep up the good work.
Discover a new path to wellness at Arizona Metabolic Health. Dr. Brian Lenzkes offers advanced medicine and personalized care, treating the root causes of your health concerns, not just the symptoms. Whether you're seeking direct primary care, effective diabetes management, or medical weight loss, with a holistic approach, our team is here to guide you every step of the way. Visit ArizonaMetabolicHealth.com today to learn more about our innovative health solutions.
When I stepped on that scale and saw the number 278 pounds, it was like a punch in the gut. I was just sick and tired of being fat, sick, and tired. I knew that I had to make a change. I started to read about the low-carb diet and I decided to give it a try. The weight started to fall off me. I added Health Code on a daily basis to my diet. It's a high-protein, healthy fat meal replacement that is simply delicious, and it's easy to make. And after I have one, I don't get hungry for hours. My strength has improved. My VO2 max has gone up 7 points. I have higher energy levels throughout the day. I want to be healthy enough to throw my grandchildren up in the air and go on hikes up a mountain with them. And I totally believe that Health Code can be an important part of that. I believe Health Code is the best meal replacement shake ever formulated. I wouldn't be taking it otherwise.
Try Health Code risk-free.
Hello and welcome back to the Life's Best Medicine podcast. And I brought in a new friend of mine. We met in a networking group here in Arizona. Ezra Lavinsky, welcome, man. Good to have you.
Hey, good morning, Brian.
And you're from Forward Momentum Counseling. So people have been telling me my whole life I should be talking to people like you. So I think this is pretty fitting. But in all seriousness, such a huge issue. I think as a primary care doc, I have so many people that either won't get counseling who can benefit from it, or especially as guys is very prideful. And so let's go all the way back, Ezra. Like, how did this all start for you? How did you think like, hey, I think I'll go into counseling? And it's specifically addiction counseling, which is a huge topic.
Yeah. Gosh, I for me, that was a midlife thing actually, where it was about a decade ago I made that decision. And for me, it had.
So what were you doing before that? You came to that conclusion? Just whatever, just kind of living life and odds and ends and that kind of stuff?
a bunch of different things. I was in restaurant management. I was a school teacher in the
Wow.
public schools for some years. And I knew that was not right for me. And because therapy had played such an important role in my life, in my own journey, uh, and it was territory I knew because I had invested a lot in it. And so I decided that that was really uh, the direction that I wanted to head in, and I have no regrets.
Yeah, awesome. So then, midlife, you go, hey, most of us are starting counseling at midlife, and you go into it to help. But it's so great to have that life experience too, to say, look, I've been through counseling. I know good counselors, I know bad, and you learn like how did it feel being the patient, and a lot of us don't know what it's like to be a patient.
Oh, I mean, and I'm so glad. Actually, oh God, when I was like 18 or 19, I first went into college. Like I majored in psychology. I was going to be. So it was kind of odd, but way back then. But it's like you don't know anything at that age. Forgive me for those of you who might be that age, but it's just I uh, most of what I practice from is my own life experience. It's not anything I read in the book.
Yeah,
But
and that's the thing is, when you go through life experience, I think that's a huge thing because a lot of people don't have the life experience you have, and if you've never, for instance, if I've never struggled with addiction, it's hard for me to like really help people with addiction or struggle with depression or anxiety and all this because you can't really understand unless you've gone through it. So sometimes life experience. So a lot of people, you're right, like in medicine. We put our head down and study and study and study, and all of a sudden, you're in med school and you're applying to all this stuff, and you get residency, and like some people have never really lived life yet. They don't have life experience, but they haven't been a patient to know what it's like. So I think once you go through, and I have a lot of colleagues who went into medicine because of their own health illnesses or accident when they were a kid, and people were compassionate and kind to them, and so they seem to have a different perspective than people who've never been in the gown laying in the bed, right?
it's interesting, and I agree with you 100%. And yet, at the same time, like I've known like people who specialized in addiction because that was their journey, and they were, in my opinion, they were not great counselors. They weren't. They lacked the self awareness. There are some, and that's not to say all of them. I'm just saying that I know of people who have gone down the road of addiction themselves, become counselors, and that didn't make them great addiction counselors. On the other hand, I've met
Mhm.
people who never struggled with addiction, but had the wisdom for some reason. They had the self awareness, and they were wonderful addiction counselors. So I
Makes
don't think,
sense. Yeah, yeah. Compassion and having a certain drive that you really are invested in that person want to help them. Yeah, no,
yeah,
I think that's absolutely true. Also, yeah, sometimes you can't learn everything from a book, but life experience isn't gonna like if you don't have the skills, even though you've been through it, if you don't have the skills to communicate with people, and that's what I hear a lot. Like a lot of people, I'll say, "How to go with your counselor?" And they go, "I just can't connect with that person. They don't get my life, right? They're not invested in what I'm doing." And so that's a common complaint.
yeah, and it's I don't know if this is related or not to what you're saying, Brian, but I think, because you never know when the a therapeutic relationship is going to work or not. For me, I find that it's like I think you need two. There's got to be two things in place. Number one is the client has to be really ready and willing to change, and change comes hard to all of us, myself very much included. You know, um, we've all got blind spots. Um, And so a client truly has to be at a point, at an inflection point in their life where they're ready to take an honest look at themselves. At the same time, they have to be paired with a competent counselor, a caring, competent counselor. And when those two come together, magic can happen. But if you've got someone who's maybe not the greatest counselor, or you got someone who's genuinely not ready to change, they just want magic change. Like they want to go in, they want to point the finger at everybody else and for all their problems, and they're expecting the therapist to just co-sign that. Nothing happens. Like, well, it just didn't work. I don't know. This guy wasn't good or whatever. But and it could be that the counselor wasn't good. but it could also be that the client just wasn't ready.
That's so true, and I think that's something that the ones who get away are the ones that hurt us. I mean, that are the most painful. Like people, they go, "Gosh, how do I reach that person?" And you're right. Even if I talk to hypnotists, and I'll say, "Gosh, it's kind of weird. Like you can make me, do weird stuff." And if you have a hypnotist, and the hypnotist will say, "No, I can't convince someone against what they subconsciously believe." For instance, they'll say, "Look, if your mom drags you in and says you need to quit smoking, and you go, I like smoking, and I don't see the bad of it. I don't know that it can cause lung cancer and all those things. It's not going to happen to me." They can't get that person to quit no matter how much hypnosis they do. And if you don't believe that you're an addict, or you don't believe that you've got interpersonal problems, it's hard to fix that. It's hard to fix if you don't go, yeah, I've got some issues I got to work on. Like, let's talk about it. I'm here for you to help me.
Yeah, and Brian, you've got to see that in your line of work where just when a client is ready to make changes versus when, they just want give me a magic pill.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, and I steer away from the magic pill. I turn away people all the time now that say, "Hey, just shoot me with that new drug and I could lose weight. I don't want to give up my pizza and cookies and donuts and beer at night." It's like, well, it doesn't work that way, right? And it's got to be the same thing with counseling. Like, I'm not ready to give up these drugs, but I want counseling on why everyone in my family is responsible for my issues right now.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, and like you're saying, as a matter of fact, it just happened. I have a guy that I tried to help probably 6 years ago, and he at that time he wasn't ready, and then he just called my office, and I go, yeah, I know that guy. I don't think he's really like invested in his health. And he says, look, I've changed. I'm investing in my health. Here's what I've done. Here's what I'm doing. Here's my. I go, okay, good. Let's do this thing, right? Uh, so yeah, a lot of people just aren't ready at the time, and then down the road they'll be able to, say, "Hey, I've changed. I'm ready. I'm really ready to not just take that magic pill. I'm really ready to do the hard work." Because the hard thing about counseling is sometimes going back to these hard things in life that we don't want to talk about, and uh, having someone guide you through all those things.
Yeah, and it's not just the past experiences. Oftentimes, it's the present experiences they don't want to talk about. They don't want to acknowledge that there's a problem in a certain area, and and there can be a resistance also to things in the past. And like, what does that have to do with today? It's like it's got everything to do with today, and whether people are aware of it or not, it's like our experiences mold us. Our childhood, our formative years, 100%, in my opinion, mold us and set the patterns into place as far as what we experience later in life. And just recognizing that connection isn't necessarily not like some epiphany of being able to connect the dots doesn't necessarily quote cure anybody. It's I think it kind of um, sets kind of turns the light on though as far as them seeing more clearly um, their behaviors in a bigger context and maybe the gravity of them.
Yeah, and if we cut down to the, and it's funny because before we start recording, you go, "Hey, Brian, I don't know if you're gonna like some of my stuff because I see where the standard traditional counseling and psychiatry are falling short." And I think that's so important. And from a medicine perspective, I had to look at that and go, wait a minute, we're not helping the patient anymore. So I think it's really hard because there's so many. Sometimes just because everyone's doing the same thing, it doesn't mean it's right. So there's a standard of care for diabetes management, for instance. It's a horrific, like we're seeing horrific diabetes management, and you go, we could do better than this. The standard's wrong, but
I told you before we did this that I think I look at therapy a little bit differently, and I think one of the problems with therapy is that people in the field want to make it appear that it's a hard science, so that to impress insurance companies so that they get reimbursement. They want to show measurements to insurance companies and just the general public. They want to make it seem like a hard science so that people will respect therapy and that it's a legitimate science and something that should be taken seriously. I don't buy into that. I see therapy as a soft science at best. I don't think the human experience is measurable. I see it as more of a spiritual journey than anything else. And so when people try to give you all these assessments and all these models, and we're gonna, what's your modality? I did an interview recently, and someone said, well, what modalities do you like to use? I said, and they want to hear something like EMDR, CBT, DBT. They just want this technical jargon. I said to them, my modality is having honest conversations with my clients. That was not the answer he wanted. And he was dumbfounded. He just stared at me. He was like, and I could tell from the look on his face, he was thinking, this guy doesn't understand the question. He's not educated. I'm like, no, I fully understand the question, but you don't understand the context of my answer. Um, so I see, um, I think insurance companies destroy healthcare in general. And the fact that so many practitioners have to answer to insurance companies, and insurance companies force certain practices on the practitioners. Um, sorry, you kind of asked me the wrong question, man, because I could go off like an
No,
hour
I'm
on
with you. No, I'm with you 100%. And let's keep with that thought, because that's what I see too. It's like, me as a physician, in the standard model, the sicker you are as my patient, the more money I make, right? The more frequently I see you, the more money I make. But I have to justify those things. Like, why are you meeting with this patient every week? Oh, they have a diabetic ulcer, so I have to see them every week to make sure that their ulcer's healing, because they have really good insurance. So I really want to follow this person closely, right? So in the direct primary care, or in the the membership model type things, like, you know what, I'm as a matter of fact, I'm calling patients and say, hey, I haven't seen you in a while. You better come in, and we better. I'm trying to get them in because they're already paying for it, right? So there, you're right. There's the incentives and the insurance model are a big problem, and the other problem is for the patient is, if you have to bill certain codes like certain psychosis or whatever to make more money, then when the patient goes to get life insurance down the road, then they're stuck with all these diagnosis codes that may not be accurate, And I found that in patients that come in with these weird diagnoses. I'm like, wait a minute, do you have this? They're like, no, I've never had that. What about this? No. What about this? No. Oh, it's all in your record.
Well,
you know
that's another big problem that I see, Brian, a lot, which I find very disturbing, is I got clients coming in. So insurance companies is kind of interesting. They basically want a diagnosis from day one. How on earth? Like, unless I'm seeing someone who's just flat out, just a junkie, right? It's like, okay, I can tell, they're struggling with an addiction. No problem. You can diagnose that very easily. And there's other things going on too, like there may be PTSD behind it, whatever. But it's not the majority of the time. I need to spend time with my client to really know what's going on. And I have people coming in, everyone. All right, I'm sorry, that's an exaggeration. All right, I would say
most, yeah.
when I was working in community mental health, I'm trying to give you an accurate number here. I would say that 60% of the people who walk through my door, and there are a lot of people walking through my door in community mental health, 60% of them had been previously diagnosed with bipolar. And after I got to know them a little bit, I'm like, that doesn't seem like an accurate disorder whatsoever. However, that feeds the psychiatrists. They got all kinds of business. It made some therapist or psychiatrist feel very professional that they was able to diagnose and throw out this diagnosis to the client, when it may have simply been something like, whatever their symptoms are, I often find it's just a response to childhood trauma, abuse, neglect. And that we're seeing the manifestations as they go along their life's journey in these rather dysfunctional, coping skills that they've developed that might have worked in their dysfunctional upbringing as children to help keep them safe, but that do not work in their adult life at all.
Yeah, it's so amazing you're talking about this, because this is one thing I just gave a talk not too long ago, and I was talking about footholds and strongholds. And so footholds are like where you step in and you dig in and you push yourself forward, and you can climb up that mountain one step at a time when you get your feet right and just have those right steps. And strongholds are these dysfunctional coping mechanisms we have. As an example would be, when you were a kid and your mom and dad are fighting and drinking in the other room, and you hide in your room and you eat cookies and you feel better, right? And then as you get older, those cookies aren't going to take away the problems that you have. And so whenever we have bad times, we go, I need cookies. I need, during COVID lockdowns, people turned to junk food like crazy and gained 30 pounds on average. And you go, wow, why were they doing that? It's because they had lost hope, and that was their only comfort in life. Or it could be alcohol use went through the roof. All these things, drug use, spousal abuse, everything went through the roof.
Yeah, no, that's a great example, Brian. Truly, I love. I mean, it's the simple picture of the child eating the cookie which turns into obesity, later in life. But that serves as a beautiful metaphor for, yeah, what I see. Um,
Yeah,
um,
and for some people it might be alcohol or pornography or video games or whatever it is, where they're just disengaged from people because it's too painful to deal with people sometimes.
yeah, there's a wonderful TED talk, and I what Johann Hari, and he does what I think was a really nice TED talk. It's entitled "Everything You Thought You Knew About Addiction Was Wrong," which I was like, I don't know where you came up with that title. Maybe everything you thought you knew about addiction was wrong,
Yeah.
but you don't know me. Anyways, but the title may not be great, but the content I thought was really good. And one of the, I love the way he says it's like addiction is just, a person's way of checking out of a life that feels intolerable, a way of numbing themselves from a life that feels intolerable for whatever reason. Their daily life feels intolerable. Um, and
Yeah,
that's
that's a huge point. I hope everyone listening grabs that. Because when your life's tolerable, like I talk to my patients a lot about these things. And so, food addiction is what I deal with a lot. And you say, well, if you're in the middle of a massage and you enjoy getting a massage, you're not going to stop halfway through and go, I need a cookie, I need a drink, I need something. You don't need something because right now life's pretty good. So what I find is when people get their life better with counseling, I'm telling you, so many people say, well, this diet doesn't work, this doesn't work, exercise doesn't work. Well, when you're stressed and tense and not sleeping, you're fighting with everyone and your life is dysfunctional. Nothing works. Nothing works right. But when you start digging out and saying, let me try to work on sleep, or let me try to work on my stress level or how I see the world, or even, counting your blessings and having gratitude, those kind of things that people just do better.
Oh yeah, I spent so much time in sessions talking to clients about gratitude. So much time. Um,
And it seems like a crazy thing. You go, gratitude, come on. Like, this is like granola. What are you talking about? But when you look at the data for gratitude, it lowers the stress hormones, increases the oxytocin, the feel good chemicals. Your mindset's better. And, people will tell me, well, mindset doesn't, is come on. It's like, that's the hocus pocus. But you go, okay, if I wake you up at 3 in the morning to go work in the field all day in the heat, you're going to like not want to get out of bed. I always say, hey, I just got a free trip to Hawaii, all expenses paid. Do you want to go? Like, you're wide awake at 3 in the morning, right? It's your perspective in life too.
it's, uh, Brian, anyone who doubts that, that's sad. There's, when I see, so I, I oftentimes say, like, I envision good mental health as the way a child draws a sunshine, a circle with a bunch of sticks coming out of it, right? And let's say there's a dozen sticks coming out of that. And I see everyone. So if the circle represents good mental health, and every stick to me represents an essential element that must be in place uh, for mental health. One of them being their physical health, but the other is the practice. One of those 12, or however many it is, there's a lot more than 12, but is the practice of gratitude daily throughout the day, every day, um, to reckon because negativity. My experience is that negativity comes very easily to people. I don't know why, but negative, fearful thoughts come free. That I don't get it. It seems to be the way God built us, but it's just like um, to think the worst case scenario, to fear outcomes. It's like it's free. That the thoughts are knocking on the door all day long, every day, cheap and easy. To redirect our thoughts onto hope and faith and gratitude for all that we take for granted. Um, it takes mental energy and effort. And especially when people are depressed, they don't want to expend the mental energy it takes to try and redirect. And the current of negativity sometimes is so strong, it feels hopeless to try and combat it with this drip or these, this one at a time thought of gratitude. But I believe truly that is an essential ingredient. It must be in place. I do not see how someone can have good mental health or physical health for that matter if they are in a constant negative mind frame. And you know better than I do as far as what the biology is of a bombardment of PTSD, basically, a bombardment of negative self-talk.
Yeah, and I was looking at a study and they were saying something like 90% of our self-talk is negative, and like 85% of those repeat every single day. And then so you have this negative, and part of this talk I gave not too long ago was, saying, okay, if you're going on a journey and you're going to take someone with you, you're going to take the person who goes, we can never do it. It's never going to work. We can never make it. It's going to be horrible the whole time. Or you have someone who goes, hey, we can do it. Let's just keep moving forward one step at a time. And I go, the person we take on the journey with us when we're trying to change our lifestyle or addiction is the one who says, you can never do this. You're not like, why do you want to take that? If you had a friend who was always negative, you want to take them with you on vacation. You're going to take the positive person who sees all the good stuff. But in ourselves, we focus on the negative. Like, you blew it this time, and there's so much self-conviction too. What they call it, self-love or self-compassion, where people just don't have compassion for themselves, and you're dumb, you can never get it right, and then you don't do it right because you tell yourself this all the time.
And the thing is, Brian, what I find is that it is so habitual because, how many thoughts do we have a day? Isn't there like some stat on like how many thoughts go through our head a
There
day?
is. I actually knew it, but I can't remember. But it was funny because it
It's
was
a
like
lot.
between 10,000 and 60,000 or something like that. And I think most of us guys are like less than 10,000 probably. So other people think more than we do, maybe.
Okay, and multiply that by however many years you've been alive. That's a lot of negative thinking, right? And I mean, that's you're talking about millions and millions of negative thoughts, if my math is correct. But the thing that I also find interesting is that no matter what, so it is so habitual that people don't even know that their thinking is negative. It's just that's their norm, that's their baseline. They're like, what are you talking about? It's just that's the way I'm supposed to think because that's all. They don't know what it's like to walk in anyone else's shoes, right? And I also think about that in terms of when I'm working with people, no matter how horrific their childhood trauma is, no matter, I mean, they always are just like, it just felt normal to me. Your daddy doesn't do that to you? It's like, because that's all they know. Of course, it feels normal to them.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the same thing. You see videos in Afghanistan where there's bombs going off and kids are playing and they're just like tuning it out, like nothing happened because it's an everyday thing. In the inner cities where there's gang shootings every day, you hear gunshots is nothing. If we hear gunshots, it's like, oh my gosh, what is that? A car backfires and five people call the police.
But nonetheless, it messes up their psyches and their sense of self and self-worth and safety in the world. It's just that, but they're kind of like numb to it, basically. They've become numb to it. But that doesn't as they go through their life, that numbness is no longer beneficial. Uh, and again, but they're just like, what are you talking about? Everything's normal. Nothing's going on.
Well, and some
Like,
people it's numbness, some people it's being the comedian and making everyone else happy. There's so much to this and how we react to our world. And one thing that we see in from the medical perspective is if your sympathetic nervous system is fired up. So there's actually a great study called the AIDS trial. A guy, Dr. Faletti from Kaiser in Southern California, they go, why does these people fail out of weight loss? They lose weight, then they gain it back. The number one reason they failed out of the weight loss program is because someone said, oh, you look great, or they tried to pick on them because they were losing weight because they wanted to be healthier and they wanted to like fit in with society and not be noticed necessarily. But when he looked at them, with adverse childhood events, like these people that were obese had way more than the general population. And if you look at it, if you have 6 or more of these criteria out of 10, your longevity is 20 years less. You're more likely to have cancer, you're more likely to have obesity, diabetes, you name it, across the board, every illness. And I think it's because your sympathetic nervous system is always set on high. Your car alarm's going off all day, all the time. And other people, it's just the wind. My car alarm's not. I don't have to run out there and check my car every 3 minutes. I know there's wind outside today.
So 110%, I agree with everything you just said. The guy though is saying like, whose car alarm's going off, it's like it doesn't feel to him any longer like his car alarm. It's just normal to him. That's baseline. He
Mm-hmm.
doesn't know that he's in fight or flight mode every moment of every day because that's just his norm. Um, and then I forgot what I was.
Oh, that's all right. Because those things, I think when we see that, you go, okay, how do I turn my car alarm off? How do I make that right? And the thing is, if your car alarm's going off or you're on this hyper uh sympathetic, fight or flight mode all the time, how do you bring calm to that? Cookies, pornography, drugs, whatever it is that is your escape, right? And people don't understand that. So what I'm getting at is if we can if you're eating processed food and sugar all the time and you're on this fight or flight and you're fighting with everyone and you're on edge and you feel like you're premenopausal all the time, uh, you're going to have more conflict in your life. And so sometimes when you get your lifestyle right, get exercise, you get your frustrations out by exercise or counseling or collecting rocks or finding your peace in life somewhere, then you don't need all those things as much. And so I've had so many patients say, once I got my lifestyle and my diet right, I don't drink as much anymore. I really don't look for it. Before they're like, oh, as soon as I get home, I'm gonna have a couple glasses of wine, and then they need coffee to get up in the morning. Then they need something to sleep at night, and then you're on 30 meds or drugs before you know it.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually, with almost every client, I will give them an ACE questionnaire, their very first session. We don't go over that session, but I'll ask them to fill it out if they're comfortable doing so. Um,
Yeah, it's such a huge thing, and then that might focus you on things you have to address. And I like what you're saying is like, look, it's not all from childhood stuff. I get that, and but it may be now that childhood stuff affects how we see things now, right? Some people become like a possum and they just like shut down and they don't say anything because they got over, everyone yelled at them at home and they couldn't speak, they had no voice. And other people dominate everything because that's a way of having control. So there's different ways of, one of my patients, I go, some people are like a lion, like they walk in and they're not worried about what everyone else thinks. They're the lion in the room. Right? But a lot of people look like a lion on the outside, but on the inside, they're this scared gazelle, like scared that everyone's getting it, but they can't show it. Because that would be, especially as guys, because that would be a sign of weakness, right? To show emotion or to connect with someone.
100%, 100%.
So Ezra, how do you do it? Like someone comes in and you really specialize more in the addiction aspects of these things too, right? And I know they all kind of meld together. But like, say I come in and I'm drinking too much every night. My wife's upset with me, having problems at work. Like, how do you start with someone like that?
Um, Gosh, it just depends on the client. I don't have any formula.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I do like I said. So at some point in the first session, that about the only thing that is constant is I'll give them an ACE and a DSM-5 questionnaire, which kind of just goes over a whole bunch of symptoms. They're both real simple assessments, but
Mm-hmm.
they give me a good bird's eye view of what's the client struggling with, you know, at the moment, presently. What are their symptoms, and what have they been through that set the patterns into place? Um, like I said, Brian, I just start having honest conversations with people. Um, and I'm gonna tell you something that actually guides my practice a lot, and it's kind of funny. I was told this when I was like 18 years old, and it's very rare in life that someone gives you tells you something at 18 and you think about it almost every day for the rest of your life. But this was one of those cases, and it really guides a lot of times how I work with my clients. What guides my thought process? He said we were sitting around a campfire one night. It was a group of kids, and and he said, you can always tell when someone's BSing you because it's boring, and you can always tell when someone's being real straight with you and real honest and vulnerable because you can hear a pin drop in the room when they're talking. Because the human experience, the real human experience, is fascinating. I don't get tired of listening to people, in the room talk to me about whatever's going on. If I sense myself starting to actually get a little bored while the client is talking, that tells me something's wrong. Like something's amiss because, again, the human experience to me is fascinating. Listening to someone be real with me. It's like when someone's in a room, and I'm sure you've experienced that where, someone's talking and you can sense they're being real, very real with you. And everybody focuses in like a laser, and you can hear a pin drop in the room because we want that honest, authentic connection. And so we just naturally like tune in like a laser. Um, that oftentimes guides like, okay, we need to change something up here.
Yeah, that's a great insight. Yeah, for sure. Because when someone's just glossing over everything and saying, "Oh yeah, this happened," and it was like, "Wait a minute, that didn't affect you emotionally." Like I've seen, I was in a church group one time. This guy goes, "Yeah, I'm just letting you guys know. I've been married for 36 years or something, and I'm leaving my wife, and I'm completely at peace with it. And I just wanted to let you know." I'm like, "Wait, what?" Like if I have a friend I've had for 6 months and something goes wrong, I feel really bad. I go, "You've been married 36 years, and you have no emotional like." You got to look at that because that's not normal. That's just not normal. You don't just walk away from, your career path and go, I'm fully at peace with it. It's like, okay, well, but if you can explain, look, here's what was happening every day at my job, and they yelled at me and they screamed at me, and you could, but that's where you can hear a pin drop because you hear what's happening. And the other thing that's interesting too with this ACE trial stuff, and in experience is If you're talking to someone about, if I ask you, Ezra, what's the most traumatic thing that's ever happened in your life? And when you start telling that story, it's like it's you feel it, your heart goes up, you sweat maybe, you get this sympathetic response. But if I say, what's the biggest accomplishment? What's the best thing that happened? You don't get that same visceral response. Like people say, yeah, I didn't feel like, you don't relive that as well as these big trauma, like being in a car accident where you almost died, or whatever, all these big traumas that we have, because and that's why PTSD is such a powerful force, is that when you keep reliving it, it's like you're there again, even if it's been 30 years. If you get, in a foxhole and bombs blow off and you blow up and you lose your best friend right in front of you, that doesn't go away. Those emotions and that can, like you're saying, when it's real, like people feel that raw. When you're, if you're BSing people, they can kind of go, wait a minute, I don't think I'm buying this story.
And something else, Brian, as far as things that guide my practice with whomever, whether it's, the alcoholic who walks in that whereas addiction is definitely my comfort zone. I really feel like I work with trauma a lot. That's really, and to me, childhood abuse, trauma, neglect, that's sort of the underpinnings for the depression that comes later, whether it's addiction, anxiety. So I work with couples and couples counseling. Um, as simplistic as it sounds, like the adage, nobody cares what you know until they know that you care. 1,000%.
Yeah, so
Until
true. That is so true. Yeah. Well, you could tell. And that's the thing. I trained doctors when I was a chief resident. And I could tell who cared and who didn't care. I'm like, this guy does not care. He's like, it's ego, arrogance. You see these things,
yeah,
and you go, oh man, I don't want that person as my doctor. But you want the person who goes, I really don't understand the answer to this, but let me look into it. I'll go research it tonight and I'll figure it out. Like let's work together on this thing. Like someone like you too, that like when you say, look, if you care and you're like, I really do want to save your relationship, it's not like, if I string this along, like, I always think of like an attorney, like divorce attorney. The longer they string it out, the more they get you upset with each other, the more money they make in the long run. So if you have someone who goes, look, let's just do it the right way, and like here's what's going to be best for you too, and let's go to someone like a mediator and let's do this very quickly. It's like, wow, I feel better about that than dragging it out and letting people be miserable. Like counseling, there's stuff where people like never move forward. They're always in the negative stage and they never get out of that.
and so what's an interesting dichotomy, and I do believe so. Um, like I believe love has to come first in my sessions. Like that has to prioritize everything. They have to know I care more than anything. Because if they don't think I care, they're not going to hear anything I got to say anyways. It's just um, there's no engine if they don't think I care. At the same time, I see too many counselors who are willing to just sit there and nod their head and smile and be sweet and caring, and it's like that to me is unethical. It's like the client is coming there for change, so at some point they have to be challenged. And so as much as I hope that my clients feel cared about, I'm not there to be their friend. I'm there to help them grow. And I do care about them professionally. So there's an interesting balance between, caring for your clients and pushing them and letting them know. I let them know, look, you're going to feel uncomfortable at times.
Especially once you've established, like, okay, I care about you, I want the best for you, this is going to hurt a little bit, but we got to go. Like, a diabetic wound doesn't just heal. You can't just say, well, let's just leave it, we'll just talk about it. You got to go, we got to get in there and clean it. It's going to hurt, like you get burned, like that's horrific stuff, but you're not going to heal until we get the dirt out of your wounds, right? And so you're right, I think that's a huge thing. But when people know you have and building that relationship, that's why it's so important. And when they know you have their vested interests and you're not just there listening and saying, oh, I get paid this money every hour, so the longer we talk, the more I make, that kind of thing. But when they know you're like saying, let's fix this problem, and it's going to hurt a little bit to fix it, but we got to do this.
I find that human nature is like very, I'm no different, that people are afraid that we all have our comfort zones. And in order to change, we must get out of our comfort zones. And that to me says that that process inherently has discomfort built into it. If we're here to change, there must be some level of discomfort.
Yeah, and then working on it, and then wanting to get better and wanting to heal. And so, like, tell me, do you have like a certain patient you think about and you go, man, this is like made my career worth it? Like this one person, like the changes that they had. I know there's so many, But are there certain ones that you go, man, that we made a huge difference in this life or their family's life?
Well, here, I'm going to answer that question a little differently than you might think. I don't think I or any other therapist truly knows the impact we make on a client, positive or negative. Um, so because and here's the way a guy I used to work with kind of said it to me, and I think it's true. You can have clients walk out of your office and be like, "Hey man, thank you so much, man. I love working with you, man. I enjoy our session so much. It has been great. I learned so much. I love coming here. You're the best." But therapy is they're leaving therapy for whatever reason, and you can say, "Oh, I did great." It's like, well, that person may leave and revert back into the same things they've always done. Um, Whereas you may have some client who you pissed off because you told them something they needed to hear, and maybe they leave therapy and never come back, right? But maybe a few years from then, like something triggers, like something happens and it triggers a memory of something you said, and maybe it has a profound effect 3 years from now. The point I'm trying to
Hmm.
make is, Brian, I think everyone in the helping professions want to believe, we're doing great, and we want confirmation of that. I like um I think at times we know a client is doing better or worse in general, but ultimately I leave that up to God as far as, you know, what positive effect I
Yeah,
have or
you're planting
not
the
had.
seeds. Yeah, you're planting the seeds. I went to a church I went to before I left California for a lot of years, and but one of my first times there, the pastor was giving a sermon. He said, "Look, if you don't feel uncomfortable in your seat sometimes or feel like kind of convicted, if you come here and go, the worship is great and there's great music and everything, and you never feel convicted, you're in the wrong church. You need to find one where you're at least going to be spoken to because none of us are perfect. And we have to look at those things. And it's not comfortable. And people don't come up and say, thank you for making me feel terrible. But then you go home and you think about it and you go, yeah, you're right. I have been weak in that area of life or whatever. And so yeah, and that's it. And you're right. And sometimes you just plant the seeds and you don't see the fruit. You don't see the fruit. You don't see the fruit. Like, yeah, I always joke with people who are youth pastors. I'm like, how do you do it? Like these kids are knuckleheads. But he said, you know how many people call me 10 years later and go, you saved my life? You mean I was on the wrong path and I didn't tell anyone. And something you said that one day, like stuck with me. Now they're going on to help other people.
Right. And this actually, it's not a client, but I actually had a colleague say to me, and I had no idea, but they said to me, I went into therapy because of you, because of something you said to me. It's like, I had no idea. Zero. So it's just like, again, I like to believe, I think the work my clients and I are doing are beneficial. I believe that. Ultimately, I'll leave that up to God, though, to decide.
Well, and I'm glad you bring this up too, because a lot of the other thing one of the big reasons I started this podcast is right during the lockdowns and maybe end of 21, uh, everyone was hopeless. I'm like, I'm gonna start a podcast and just give people hope. Go, look, it's gonna get better. Things will get better. And I got attacked for like 3 or 4 days on social media from other doctors. Like, how dare you say that? It's never gonna change. I'm like, to me, hell is like having no hope or no hope that you can get better. And there's no choice. You have nothing that is going to be redeeming in your life or that you're just you don't matter. I mean, so many I see these young kids that go, my life doesn't matter. It does matter. It does matter. Like when you start realizing how much of an impact we all have on each other and just something you say that just changes a life somewhere.
And I just think, another aspect of the way I work with clients is I think faith is super important. And I don't mean that I push my faith on anyone else. But if a client has their own faith, their own spirituality of any kind, then I'm going to encourage them to strengthen their own faith. Um, and to use that as a pillar of support for their mental, emotional, spiritual health. And a lot of times, if clients have had a bad experience with religion in the past, they can get anxious around that. And I'm like, I'm not like, if it's their faith, whatever they come and say, this is my belief system, great. If you believe in grass, good, go right ahead, whatever. But I to me and in my own faith leanings, or I consider myself a practicing Christian. That's real important to me. But to me, I kind of boil that down to, you know, God is love. He who dwelleth in love dwelleth in God, and God in He. It's like that's it. I keep it super simple. You know, As Jesus said, love one another as I have loved you. That is how they will know you're my disciple. And that's what I try and keep in mind in how I work with clients. I don't get religious, but those are the kind of simple principles that to me guide my particular faith journey.
Yeah, and that's a huge thing. And you would be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't be surprised, but I'm kind of surprised the more people I talk to in the healing professions like medicines have there's a good percentage of people who live by faith. And to say that, they go, how can you believe in faith when you're like an intellect? When you study all these things, like the more you study, the more you go, because I
I don't
know
know anything.
when you know everything that could go wrong, you go, wow, it's amazing that everyone's kidneys aren't failing and they're not going blind in there. I mean, it's amazing how our body is so resilient to all the dumb stuff we do, like all the dumb stuff we did as a kid and drank too much or whatever, took too many drugs, and your body still survived that and it was able to detox it and do. I mean, the miracle that we see. It's hard to say. Like if you just look at the fingers and the hand and all these things, when it goes wrong, you realize it, But when you lose function of your hand, when you get it back, you appreciate that hand every time. Go, oh my gosh, I remember when I was in that cast for 6 months and how miserable it was. I couldn't put my shirt on by myself, and we don't appreciate stuff until it's gone or until it's until we have to do without it. And people are the same. Like we don't realize how important our wife is to us or our kids or whatever until you don't have them for a while, or they're at risk of being taken from you with cancer or an accident or something crazy like that. But
And then
yeah,
that just goes back.
and that's
That just goes
the
back
other
to
thing. Oh, go ahead, please.
gratitude. I'm sorry. That
Oh,
just goes back that just goes back to gratitude again.
yeah, it goes back to gratitude, and I think when a lot of us are looking at what we don't have rather than what we do have, and so I think
Mhm.
I find that my patients who have gratitude, faith, whatever faith it is, I don't care what faith you got, but if you have something, you go, my mom always said this too shall pass. You go through hard times, you go, you know what? I'm gonna look back at all the times where I thought my life was over, and like you're still going, so this is no big deal compared to what happened 5 years ago. When you lost all, declared whatever it is, declared bankruptcy or whatever, and you just keep moving on. And I think there's a lot. I was just talking to my father-in-law about that. He was in Vietnam, and we were talking about survivor's guilt of if one person survives an accident or something like that, and he says, at some point you have to have a perspective. It's like your time card's not being punched today. It's not your day. And you just go through life that way, and say, okay, today's not the day. I'm not, or I'm going to have faith until the very last breath and last hope that you have at least some hope that things are going to get better. Cause I think losing that hope is horrific for people. And there's a lot of people who have controlled this with fear and taking our hope away. And then you live your life differently in those kind of situations.
And there's, yeah, I mean, I find that, they call them protective factors. I just find that people who have like a real faith, practice gratitude, take care of their physical health, they just tend to, I, I find that like those are, well, the opposite, like someone who has no faith of any kind, just doesn't, just they're out there on their own, um, have no gratitude. It's all, it's them against the world. It's like it typically doesn't bode well for outcomes.
Yeah. And as guys, you say we do it all in our own strength and we brag about everything we do. And like those kind of people are the most empty. I find that there's people who have been successful in life and made millions, but you ask their wife or friends and you go, wow, a friend of mine has done well for himself. And I asked him, I said, did it change who you are? And he says, you know what? It just magnifies who you already are, really. Like if you make a lot of money and you're a jerk, you become a super tyrant jerk. And if you're kind and decent, now you have you can help other people, and you realize the more you help other people, the more you make, the better your life is, and you have that reward. And so it's hard. So it's so many people I see that are the most miserable, and who are struggling with substance abuse maybe too, or where it's all about them. Everything's about them and what they need, and they'll take advantage of everyone around them to get what they want.
Yeah, being of service to others, I think that's so. That's another one of those little sticks on the sunshine.
Mm-hmm.
Giving back in some way. I don't know. I just think that I if all we're doing is thinking about serving our own selfish, self-centered needs, again, I don't think that bodes well for good mental, emotional, spiritual health.
And because ultimately you realize there's emptiness in that. So many movie stars who are made millions of dollars kill themselves. And you go, what happened? Like, because they looked and they're like, I have everything. I can have whatever I want, and it's not enough. And they're not happy. And other people realize, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? Like,
You
let
can,
me go help people. Let me go go to an orphanage in Ghana or something, right? And you're seeing the fruit of what you're doing. And that's why, healers like you are doing such great work. And especially like what you're saying is you have to realize you may not see the fruit right now, but someone may call you in 2 years and go, man, what you said that day, and you don't even remember saying it, saved my life, changed my perspective, whatever it is.
yeah.
So Ezra, what's life's best medicine for you, man? Like, what do you say? Like, this is what keeps me going. This is what I would tell my friends, or if I, this is my last podcast. What do I want to tell people that really matters?
So, for me, I mean, the things that feed my soul are number one, my faith. That plays a role in my life every minute, of my waking life, and that brings me comfort, and peace. More tangibly, I'm very ever since college, I actually wanted to be when I was a young man. I wanted to be a potter. I worked on the potter's wheel. I started in college, and I just loved it. Some physical limitations prevented me from being a full-time potter, but any minute I'm not working, basically I'm in the studio at the Potter's Wheel.
Very cool. Yeah, and the potter, you gotta get all the gunk out of the middle, and then the other thing is you see the final, and sometimes you don't, and it changes. You go, I'm gonna make this. I go, I think I'm gonna make this now, right? And that's kind of like what we are. We're like the clay in the potter's hands. It's like, how are you gonna end up? It depends on how much work you put into it, and your creativity and all that. So that's super cool too. Like, that's got to be relaxing. You just get it, be zen, and kind of go, I think I'm gonna make it this color, or be able to change like what you first start. You think the product's going to be, and it ends up something totally different in the end. Or you see it before it happens, and you go, "That's exactly how I envisioned it."
I had somebody actually from the networking group come over, and they were in the studio, and they were just like, so you're a part-time therapist, and this is what, like, you're a full-time potter and you're a part-time therapist? No, no, it's the other way around.
Yeah, yeah, but that's it. Then you can reflect and you can do stuff like getting that little escape from life, right? Instead of maybe drugs and alcohol, you can say, "Let me go work on my pottery, or let me go do my exercise, or let me go look over the lake, or whatever, go for a hike." And so I think for everyone, it's like finding your comfort
Yeah,
and your peace wherever it might be.
and that's, and I know we're about out of time, but I think for anyone struggling, and that's another part of therapy within when I work with long term, is like helping them find things they're passionate about. We're blessed, and I think we take it for granted all the time. We live in a first world country. We live in the best of the first world countries, and um, we are not, most of us, not all of us certainly, but most of us are lucky enough that we don't have to worry about food and shelter, or bombs going off. Our survival needs for most Americans are at least steady. Um, and so we have the luxury and the need, therefore, I believe, to pursue things that speak to our soul, like what, artistic expression. I use that word artistic loosely, whether it's sports or you want to work on automobiles or whatever your interests are, MMA, music. But I think because our basic needs, for the most part, are taken care of, that it's like as Americans, we're lucky enough that we have so much need to find something that speaks to our heart. Um, and without it, I think there's great emptiness in us. What does it Maslow calls? I forget. You probably know better than I do. Self. What's the word? I think Maslow has a hierarchy of
Self-actualization or something like that.
yeah. There's some
Oh,
whatever.
the hierarchy of human needs or something, right?
Yeah, and the bottom is just like food, shelter, safety
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
thing. And then as you go up, as you're lucky enough, as those needs get met, you look for things like self-expression and things of that. And because the basic needs are met, for hopefully the majority of Americans, they have a need for more, which is to express themselves in some way, shape, or form. And without it, again, well, we're going to look for something else to kind of numb out.
Yeah, so you're doing great work. How do people track you down if they want to find you, if they want to join your practice, and tell people a little bit about your practice?
Yeah. I'm in my office is in Prescott, and it is you can find my website is forwardmomentumcounseling.net, and all my contact information is on there. You want to see my pottery, you can go to ezrapottery.com.
Oh, cool,
Um,
cool, man.
and I'm trying to think. I think as far as contact me professionally, the website should give people all the information they need. You can find me on Psychology Today also. Um,
Awesome. And I'll put a link to all that in the show notes. And you're licensed now in Arizona?
just Arizona, there, unfortunately, just like with medicine, there's just not reciprocity. And they're,
Yeah.
thank goodness, they're actually, I hear they're actually they're trying to work on that. Um, and hope I heard that in 25 they're actually going to try to pass some reciprocity with some other states, and that would be a great thing.
Yeah, that's good. I think we need that because there's such a need everywhere. But if you're in Arizona, look this guy up, especially if you have faith, because it's so hard to find counselors of faith, right? It's very unusual. It's a niche really. So if you're looking for someone and you're struggling with addiction, you're struggling with childhood trauma or current trauma, all those things, Ezra's a great person to track down, especially if you're in Arizona. You're especially for my patients, like because we're talking the same language, and so it's super great to have you on. Great, thanks for joining me and taking time out of your day. And sorry about the internet stuff was on. It's things are a little choppy. That's on my end. Something great. You do it from my office where I never do it, but. Ezra, thanks for putting up with me today. It was great having you. And for everyone, be kind to yourself, be kind to others. Listen to the advice you're getting here. I'm telling you, even though they're not giving you medical advice, we have a little precursor to this, but it's never going to be wrong to count your blessings and take a minute, do your devotions in the morning, look at the good things in life. Don't focus on the bad. The news is just going to show you the bad, but start talking to
Mhm.
people about all the good things, talk to your Uber driver and see what they're saying and, get a flavor of how much goodness. And just remember, whenever something bad happens, there's a bomb that goes off or something like that, there's hundreds of people running into that to save people, right? To help people. And,
Mm.
there's so many good people out there. So if you need help, don't just bury yourself and hide and hide in your addiction. Reach out to someone who can help you.
Thanks,
Ezra,
Brian. That
thanks,
was
man. Have a
fun.
great rest of your week.
Thank you. You too, Brian. Bye bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode. We greatly appreciate your support. We would greatly appreciate a positive thumbs up on all of the platforms like iTunes and Spotify or wherever you're listening. And we just thank you for our Patreon supporters. We greatly appreciate your help in getting this message out. We think there's a lot of important information. And hopefully this helps you. Have a great day. And thank you for listening. And thank you for your support.